He booked a coach seat under a fake name but froze. When two flight attendants said what they really thought about black executives, what happens when the man with the power to change everything chooses to disappear? Isaiah Miles wasn't just any passenger in seat 26C. He was the president of Peregrine Air on a mission to see the truth about his own airline. No press, no cameras, just a quiet seat in the back of coach. But then, he overheard them, two flight attendants, whispering just a little too loud. Their words, cold, casual. He's probably just a diversity hire. They weren't talking about Isaiah, but they might as well have been. What do you do when the people you've spent your life leading, people you've protected and promoted, believe you don't belong? What does real leadership look like when no one is watching? And how do you fix a broken culture from 30,000 feet in the air? This is not a story about flying. It's a story about seeing. If you're ready for a journey that goes deeper than altitude, hit that like button, share this story, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's begin. Isaiah Miles stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the soft flannel collar of a shirt he hadn't worn in over a decade. It hung loosely on his shoulders. Now he was leaner than he used to be. The result of years of erratic schedules and skipped meals, not discipline. The shirt had belonged to a simpler version of himself, one who wasn't carrying the weight of 22,000 employees, quarterly reports, or legacy-building decisions. The knock came on cue. Room service. He ignored it. He wasn't hungry. Tonight wasn't about comfort. Tonight was about becoming invisible. On the bed behind him sat a modest duffel bag, no monogram. No sleek leather, just scuffed navy canvas, and a faded Peregrine University patch peeling off one side. It had been his carry-on in the early days, when he was a fresh-faced flight attendant navigating red-eyes and reroutes. That same bag would now accompany him on a mission few in his executive circle even knew about. Isaiah Miles, president of Peregrine Air, was about to fly coach. Alone, unrecognized, unfiltered, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what he might hear. The idea had been his. After 3 straight quarters of declining customer satisfaction, increasing employee turnover, and a PR firestorm following a passenger mishandling incident, the board had demanded answers. More training, more policy revisions, more slogans. Isaiah had nodded through the meetings, but something in him recoiled at the glossy presentations and metrics. "We don't have a branding problem," he'd said, almost under his breath. "We have a listening problem." They hadn't heard him, but he'd heard himself. So he'd made a plan, a simple one. He would book 4 flights across Peregrine's domestic routes under a pseudonym, sitting in the back of the plane like any other passenger, listening not to data, but to people. His executive assistant had resisted. "Sir, we can send mystery shoppers. They don't carry our name." Exactly. He'd smiled at that. It was the first time he'd smiled all week. The Uber ride to Portland International was quiet. Isaiah gazed out the window at the heavy gray clouds sagging low over the city, wondering if they mirrored the culture at Peregrine now. Heavy, opaque, on the verge of releasing something. He showed his boarding pass, Mr. Eli Moss, to the gate agent and received a practiced nod. No eye contact, no greeting, no sense that this was anything more than a routine exchange. He didn't mind. That was the point. Boarding was announced in tears. No special treatment, no priority line. Isaiah waited in a slow-moving pack of travelers in windbreakers and hoodies, clutching neck pillows and cell phones with cracked screens. It had been years since he'd stood this far back in line. His feet ached before he even stepped on the plane. Row 29C, aisle seat, Coach, window already taken, middle seat empty for now. The air smelled faintly of coffee, old leather, and something overly citrus, probably an attempt to mask the scent of a day's worth of bodies. Overhead bins were half full. He shoved his duffel under the seat in front of him and sat. The cushion was thinner than he remembered. The air colder. The space tighter. And yet, it was comforting in a strange way, like slipping into a forgotten room in your childhood home and realizing it hadn't changed, even if you had. He watched as the other passengers filed in. A young woman cradling a toddler, a teenage boy with a beat-up gaming laptop, an older couple whispering in clipped German. Nobody looked at him twice. Good. As the cabin filled, a woman in her 70s with white curls and a sequined cardigan tapped his shoulder. "Mind if I squeeze in?" she asked with a warm smile. He stood to let her in. "Of course." She settled into the window seat with the slow deliberateness of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. She smelled faintly of lavender and menthol. "Marla Jensen," she said, extending a hand. "Eli?" he replied. He still wasn't used to the name. "I fly this route every 3 months to see my granddaughter. She just turned 11. Smart as a whip and taller than me now. Imagine that." Isaiah smiled. "Sounds like she's lucky to have you." "Oh, honey," she chuckled. "I'm the lucky one. Planes these days may feel like tin cans, but they still get me to her. That's all I care about." Her tone was cheerful, but her eyes said more. She remembered when flying felt different. Warmer. Kinder. So did he. A final group boarded late among them, a teenager in a NASA hoodie who dropped into the middle seat beside him, barely offering a glance. Earbuds in. Game on. The boy didn't say a word, but Isaiah saw the title on his screen, Sky Clash. Ironic. As the engines whirred and the plane taxied toward the runway, Isaiah leaned back in his narrow seat, feeling anonymous in the best and worst ways. This was it, the start of something, a return to the beginning. But he had no idea just how much of himself he'd confront in the rows ahead. The hum of the engines deepened as the plane lifted off. Portland's gray skyline vanishing behind a curtain of clouds. Isaiah felt the familiar pull of a scent press against his chest, a sensation he hadn't paid attention to in years. It used to excite him, the physical promise of movement, of getting somewhere. Now it just felt heavy. The seatbelt buckle dug into his hip. He shifted. From row 29C, the cabin stretched out like a world apart, different from the polished wood-paneled lounges he usually waited in. The executive suites with glass partitions, the filtered boardroom presentations about customer experience. From here, customer experience was cramped. Devin, the teen beside him, kept shifting in his seat, elbows casually invading Isaiah's space. On the other side, Marla rifled through her handbag with soft rustling sounds, pulling out a tissue, a bag of butterscotch candies, and a small framed photo of her granddaughter, which she placed gently in the seatback pocket in front of her. "You ever notice how cold they keep it in here?" she asked, wrapping a light scarf around her shoulders. Isaiah nodded. "Noticed that the second I sat down. Used to be they gave you a blanket and a smile," she said, not bitterly, just remembering. "Now it's $20 for a snack box and half a glance from the crew." She popped a candy into her mouth and leaned back. Still, not complaining. Better than driving. A chime sounded. The overhead lights dimmed. A voice came on, brisk, clipped, impersonal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. Flight attendants will begin beverage service shortly. Please remain seated unless absolutely necessary. Isaiah caught the tone functional, tired. He tried not to judge. He looked down the narrow aisle. The galley curtain swayed slightly as the crew prepared carts and supplies. One of the attendants, a woman with sharp red lipstick and a perpetual frown, peeked through, clocking the passengers. Her name tag read Amber. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Maybe she'd had a hard day. Or maybe this was just how things were now. A few rows ahead, a toddler began to fuss. A beat later, a different passenger male. Middle-aged sighed audibly and muttered something under his breath. Devon removed one earbud, smirked, and whispered, "And here comes the downfall of civilization." Isaiah looked over. "You fly often." "Every couple months," Devon replied. "Split custody thing. Back and forth between L.A. and Seattle. Usually ends with a missed connection or a migraine. You always fly Peregrine." Devon shrugged. "Mom books the cheapest. Doesn't matter the airline, they all treat you like cattle back here." That hit harder than it should have. Isaiah smiled faintly. "I'll admit, it's a little snug." Devon side-eyed him. "You new to coach or something?" "Something like that," Isaiah said. The kid studied him, skeptical, but didn't press. The beverage cart creaked its way down the aisle 15 minutes later. Amber led the service with the kind of energy that suggested she'd rather be doing literally anything else. Behind her was a male crew member younger, disinterested, scanning each row like he was looking for someone to blame for his boredom. "Drink?" Amber asked flatly, reaching Isaiah's row. "Water, please," Marla said politely. "Coke?" Devon replied, then added, "if it's not flat." Amber ignored the comment. Isaiah asked for black coffee. Amber handed him a small cup, lid slightly askew, the coffee lukewarm at best. "Thanks," he said anyway. She moved on without reply. Isaiah took a sip and stared into the bitter liquid. He remembered meetings about this exact coffee, discussions on vendor partnerships, packaging redesigns, cost per cup margins. There'd even been a debate about switching to compostable stir sticks. They'd spent weeks talking about coffee, but no one had asked how it tasted at 33 feet. Marla stirred her water with the straw and leaned toward him slightly. "Did you see how she looked at that mother with the crying baby I did? Flight attendants used to help. Now they glare." Isaiah wanted to defend them. He knew how exhausting those long flights could be, how demanding passengers could become. But in that moment, he couldn't find the words. He just nodded. Devon pulled off his headphones. "They're underpaid and overworked," he said, surprisingly thoughtful. "But still, no excuse to treat people like trash." Isaiah glanced at him. There was more to this kid than sarcasm. "You seem pretty tuned in," Isaiah said. Devon shrugged. "I notice stuff. I don't talk a lot, but I watch." Isaiah smiled. "Me too." As the cart rolled farther down, a sudden jolt rocked the cabin. Turbulence. Seatbelt signs blinked to life. Trays clattered. A few passengers cursed. Marla gripped the armrest. Her butterscotch rolled to the floor. "I hate this part," she muttered. Isaiah reached over gently. "Here." He offered her hand. She hesitated, then clasped his. His palm was steady. Hers was cold and trembling. For a brief moment, they weren't passengers. They were just people. Two strangers, suspended in the sky, bracing against a world they couldn't control. When the turbulence subsided, Marla let go with a quiet, "Thank you." Devon didn't say anything, but Isaiah noticed him glance sideways, almost approvingly. The cabin settled again. People returned to movies, games, silence. Flight attendants disappeared behind curtains. Isaiah leaned back, staring at the gray fabric ceiling, a place few executives had ever bothered to look. He had pages of notes in his head, already small things, sharp things. But it wasn't the seat or the coffee or the attitude that haunted him. It was the silence, the lack of welcome, the absence of warmth, the feeling that back here, you weren't meant to be seen. He closed his eyes, unaware that the most piercing thing he would hear on this flight was yet to come just a few rows away. Whispered between colleagues who thought no one was listening, Isaiah had always believed in the value of proximity. You learn more from being close to the work, to the people, to the pain than from any dashboard report or 5-star survey score. But sitting shoulder to shoulder in coach for 3 hours was turning that belief into an embodied experience. Everything touched you here. Elbows, coughs, conversations, nothing buffered, nothing filtered. And for the first time in a long time, Isaiah felt present. "Is this your first time flying Peregrine?" Marla asked, sipping the last of her warm water. Isaiah hesitated. First time in a while. She nodded knowingly. You can always tell who's new. They still expect comfort. He smiled. "And what do the regulars expect endurance?" she said, without irony. Isaiah glanced sideways. Why stick with it? Then Marla turned her head, her blue eyes focused but not harsh. Because it's still safer than driving? Because it gets me to my people? And because loyalty, well, it used to mean something. That last part landed heavier than she intended. Isaiah didn't press. A low mechanical click came from Devon's lap. He'd paused his game again, headphones around his neck now, music faintly pulsing. "You work in consulting or something?" He asked Isaiah. "Why do you think that you ask questions like a guy who gets paid to solve problems he doesn't fully understand?" Isaiah chuckled softly. Fair read. Devon leaned back, arms crossed. "People like you usually sit up front. Maybe I wanted to change my view." The boy narrowed his eyes slightly, as if trying to decipher something written behind Isaiah's calm demeanor. But whatever he found, he kept to himself. The mother with the toddler 3 rows ahead was now softly humming to calm her child, who was starting to fuss again. The melody was familiar. Something folk. Maybe Appalachian. Isaiah noticed how few people around her even turned to look, except one man across the aisle who put in his earbuds a little more aggressively. No flight attendant came to offer help. Devon observed it too. They really don't care back here. Huh? They're probably stretched thin, Isaiah replied carefully. Yeah, but so are we. It wasn't said with bitterness, more like resignation. A truth Devon had accepted long before Isaiah. Later, after the cabin lights dimmed for the mid-flight lull, Marla pulled a small notebook from her bag. Its cover was frayed and floral, held together with a rubber band. She didn't hide it. She wrote openly, with steady, looping script. Isaiah tilted slightly. You journal always, she replied, mostly for my granddaughter. I want her to know what life was like before it all got like this. He didn't ask what this meant. He already knew. Sometimes I write letters to people I never send. Helps me forgive them. That work, he asked. Some days. She gave him a small, tired smile and kept writing. From across the aisle, a voice rose. 2 men co-workers. From the sound of it were complaining about an app crash, then pivoted into a venting session about travel in general. Words like cheap, unreliable, disconnected filtered across rows like smog. Isaiah listened quietly, noting the tone more than the content. It wasn't outrage, It was disappointment. That was worse. He turned to Devon. What would make this better? If you could fix anything, Devon didn't answer right away. Not asking for luxury, he said eventually. Just a little respect. Some humanity. Maybe one crew member who actually looks you in the eye. You notice when they don't. Doesn't everybody? Isaiah sat with that for a long moment. Then, almost without thinking, he asked, "What do you want to do after school?" Devon shrugged. Maybe something with data. Maybe journalism. I like writing. I like watching. Just don't want to work for a place that says it cares but treats people like dirt. The sentence lingered. Isaiah glanced forward toward the closed curtain of the galley, where laughter had just erupted private, distant, sealed away. He looked down at his coffee cup, now empty and cold, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if he'd become part of the system Devon resented. The cabin grew quiet as passengers settled into movies and naps. Isaiah felt Marla gently nodding off beside him, her hand still lightly curled around the pen. Devon resumed his game, the soft blue glow illuminating his intent face. And Isaiah stared straight ahead, feeling the weight of every inch of space between row 29 and the captain's cabin, not in miles or class, but in mindset. There were passengers back here who could name every failing and every kindness in a 10-minute span, who still cared enough to complain, who still hoped something would change. They weren't numbers. They were mirrors. What he hadn't expected when he planned this journey was that the biggest discoveries wouldn't come from what the crew did wrong. They would come from what the people around him saw, and how clear that vision became when no one was pretending. He leaned back and closed his eyes. He didn't yet know that. Soon, someone would say something not meant for his ears, and that the real test of leadership would begin the moment the world thought he wasn't listening. The plane shuddered unexpectedly, not a subtle rock, but a deep roll that caused several passengers to gasp aloud. Isaiah's eyes snapped open. A muffled chime sounded, and the seatbelt signs blinked to life overhead. The captain's voice followed, even and calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a patch of rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Isaiah looked to his right. Marla was already upright, eyes wide, hands gripping the armrests like they were lifelines. Devon had yanked his earbuds out and was craning to look out the window, as if that would offer answers. Another jolt hit, sharp this time. The plane dipped. People tensed. A tray clattered to the floor a few rows ahead, spilling pretzels and a cup of ginger ale across the aisle. Isaiah inhaled deeply and exhaled through his nose, willing his body to stay loose. He'd been through worse turbulence before, many times. But something about this moment, the noise, the faces, the proximity of vulnerability made it feel more like everything was vibrating just beneath the surface. Marla turned to him, voice trembling. "Is this normal?" "Yes," Isaiah said softly, anchoring her gaze. "The plane's built for this. It feels scarier than it is." She nodded, though her jaw was still tight. Devon muttered, "Plane feels like a dying fish in a bathtub." That earned a nervous chuckle from a nearby passenger. Even fear, Isaiah realized, had room for humor in close quarters. As the cabin rocked again, Isaiah's mind drifted not to memories of flying, but to memories of falling. 10 years ago, he was in a different office, pitching a reform proposal to Peregrine's senior leadership team as a regional director. Better support for ground crew, revised staffing protocols, real investment in employee wellness. They listened, smiled, then shelved it. Not cost-aligned, not scalable, not shareholder forward. He remembered walking out of that room, feeling like someone had knocked the wind out of him, not because they disagreed, but because he'd seen in their eyes that they never planned to engage at all. It was the same look he'd seen just yesterday on a flight attendant's face as she passed a disabled passenger who was struggling with an overhead bag. He hadn't intervened then. Why not? Was he complicit? Had he adapted to the altitude of corporate culture so thoroughly that he no longer recognized the thin air it ran on? The plane jolted again. Marla reached for his hand, this time without asking. He gave it freely. Across the aisle, a flight attendant appeared briefly, checking the rows. It wasn't Amber. This one was younger, male, with hollow eyes that scanned without focus. He didn't stop to speak, just glanced and moved on. In that moment, Isaiah saw the weariness etched into the man's posture. Not laziness, defeat. How many months or years had it taken to replace care with survival? The turbulence eased, little by little, like a storm tiring itself out. But Isaiah felt no calm. His own mind was still rattling thoughts colliding, questions pressing against the boundaries he usually kept so well defined. Was he doing enough? Had he become too careful? Was his silence in meetings, in flights, in hallways just another version of abandonment? "I'm fine now," Marla said quietly, her grip loosening. "Sorry." "You don't have to be sorry for being scared," Isaiah said, more to himself than her. She looked at him strangely for a moment, then smiled. "You remind me of my husband." "Used to say that, too." Devin broke the silence a few minutes later. "You looked freaked for a second." "I was thinking," Isaiah replied. "About what crashing? No," Isaiah said slowly. "About choices." Devin gave a dry laugh. "That's worse." The intercom crackled again. The captain, now slightly more relaxed, updated the passengers' clear skies ahead. Beverage service would resume soon. The cabin exhaled. Conversations resumed. Laughter. Plastic rustling. But Isaiah remained still, staring at the seat in front of him. He remembered once thinking that flying was the ultimate form of liberation, the freedom of distance, the beauty of perspective. Now it felt like a mirror, one you couldn't escape. He glanced sideways. Devin had gone back to his game. Marla was thumbing through her notebook again. Isaiah pulled out his phone. No texts, no emails, no calendar reminders. He'd turned them off. He opened a blank note and typed, "Empathy without presence becomes pity. Leadership without proximity becomes performance." Then deleted it. Too polished. He wasn't sure what he felt yet, only that something in him had shifted during the turbulence. Not because the plane shook, but because for a few minutes, everyone around him had become utterly real. He looked down at his hands, one still tingling from the pressure of Marla's grip. He remembered something his mother once told him, back when he'd first become a manager. Don't confuse power with distance. The further up you go, the closer you need to get. He had never fully understood it. Until now. The lights were dimmed, casting the cabin in a soft glow, interrupted only by the occasional reading lamp or the flicker of screens. Isaiah had just stretched his legs beneath the seat when the call light above a passenger 2 rows ahead blinked to life. No one came. It blinked again. Still nothing. After 3 minutes, Isaiah gently stood, careful not to wake Marla, who had dozed off against the window with a blanket wrapped neatly around her shoulders. Devin had removed his headphones and was scrolling through something on his phone, but didn't look up. "I'll be right back," Isaiah said quietly. Devin nodded. He walked slowly toward the rear galley, his legs tight from sitting. The aisle was quiet, most passengers resting or distracted. When he reached the back, he found the space empty except for the faint hum of the coffee warmer and the rustle of a bag of pretzels being opened behind the curtain. Isaiah wasn't sure if he was supposed to be there. A passenger loitering in crew space always felt intrusive, but he needed a moment to move, to breathe. He reached for a cup and quietly poured himself some coffee. Just as two voices emerged from behind the curtain, he froze. "And then he struts on board like we're supposed to roll out a red carpet," said a sharp nasal voice. "Designer shoes, perfect teeth, expensive headphones. Bet he's trying to play man of the people." A second voice responded, hushed but bitter. "I know exactly who he is, or who he's pretending not to be." A short laugh. "Let me guess, one of the DEI picks from Corporate Please. Diversity hire with a Rolex and a resume curated for LinkedIn. I don't care what corner office he's from. He gets the same half-melted sandwich as the rest of them." They both laughed again. Isaiah felt his pulse spike, his hand gripping the paper coffee cup too tightly. He wasn't sure who they were talking about. At first, he feared it was him. But then came the next line. "I think it's the guy in 5A. You didn't see him. Tall, well-dressed. Kept asking the gate agent about the loyalty program updates. Probably some VP trying to play undercover boss. Please, if they wanted to know what really goes on back here, they'd have to stay longer than a 3-hour photo op." The first voice hissed under her breath, "God, I hate how this job has changed. We used to have class. We used to matter." Isaiah took a step back, pressing himself quietly against the galley wall. He didn't want to hear more, but he needed to. Because it wasn't about 5A. It never had been. It was about a mindset. One that could casually label someone a token. One that could dismiss progress as pretense. One that more than any coffee complaint or seat cushion survey revealed the deepest break inside the company he helped lead. He realized suddenly that his hand was shaking. He set the cup down. Just then, one of the voices emerged from behind the curtain. It was Amber. Her face shifted the moment she saw him, just for a split second, before resetting into practiced neutrality. "Need anything, sir?" she asked. Isaiah forced a polite smile. "Just stretching." She nodded and moved past him without another word, her expression unreadable. The other attendant, a brunette with a tired face, and the name tag Melanie, peeked through next, holding a tray of cups. She didn't notice him, didn't look twice, didn't see the man who had just heard everything. Isaiah walked slowly back down the aisle. His steps felt heavier now. He didn't want to sit back down. He didn't want to be Eli Moss anymore. But mostly, he didn't want to admit that part of him wasn't surprised. Back at row 29, Marla was still asleep. Devin looked up as Isaiah returned. "You okay?" Isaiah paused, then nodded. "Yeah." He sat down, placed his hands in his lap. But his mind was elsewhere, not on the conversation itself, but on what it revealed. Because this wasn't about two unprofessional attendants venting. This was about how easily cruelty slips into routine, how assumptions get spoken like facts, how a company's slogans and values mean nothing if the people repeating them don't believe. Or worse, mock them. He stared forward, the sound of their laughter still echoing in his head. He had come here to observe service quality. Instead, he'd uncovered something far more important, something far more broken, and he couldn't unhear it. He wouldn't. Back in seat 29C, Isaiah sat still, too still. Outside, the sky was darkening into the deep indigo of high-altitude dusk. Inside, the overhead lights glowed soft and amber, casting long shadows across the worn armrests and scratched tray tables. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Marla stirred beside him, pulling her scarf tighter. She blinked sleepily. "You're quiet," she said gently, "quieter than before." Isaiah smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking. Thinking's dangerous up here," she said with a half-laugh. "Too much sky makes you look inward." He turned toward the window, where only wing and cloud remained. That was exactly the problem. He thought of Melanie's voice, sharp with judgment, laced with cynicism. "I don't care what corner office he's from. He gets the same half-melted sandwich as the rest of them. Diversity hire." The words weren't unfamiliar. He'd heard variations before in back rooms, between coughs of laughter, in passive, aggressive compliments like "you're so articulate," in the side glances when he walked into a room before they expected him. But hearing it now, here, from within his own company, stripped of politeness, voiced without fear of being held accountable, cut deeper. Because it wasn't just about prejudice. It was about detachment, about rot, and maybe somehow about him. "Hey," Devin said quietly, pulling one earbud out. "You sure you're okay?" Isaiah blinked. "Why, 'cause you're doing that thing adults do when they've just realized something important and are trying not to show it." Isaiah gave a soft laugh, short, surprised. That obvious Devin shrugged. A little. He paused, as if weighing whether to continue. Then, "You don't seem like most people who sit back here. Not in a bad way. Just different. Like, you're trying to see something." Isaiah turned toward him. "What do you think I'm trying to see?" Devin hesitated, then said quietly, "How bad it really is." The truth hung there, suspended. Isaiah didn't answer. Not directly. But his silence spoke volumes. How bad it really is. He had the reports, the metrics, the carefully curated customer satisfaction dashboards, but none of them said this airline has a cultural infection. Your staff has stopped believing in the mission. People think your values are a PR stunt. That truth was only visible from seat 29C. He reached down and opened the small notebook he'd tucked inside his backpack. Not a company-issued tablet. Not a stylized folder with the Peregrine logo. Just a blank page. He started writing. Attendant ignored call light for 3+ minutes. Tone with passengers varies drastically by cabin row. Middle aisle child crying, no assistance. Back galley conversation overheard direct contradiction of company values. Possible bias incident. Then, without thinking, he added, "It's not a service gap. It's a respect gap." He paused, stared at the words. They looked too small for what they meant. Marla leaned over, curious. Work stuff Isaiah didn't close the notebook. Something like that. She gave him a knowing smile. "You've got that weight in the chest look. You carry something big. And I don't mean a fancy job title. I mean responsibility." Isaiah studied her for a second. "What makes you say that?" Marla's voice softened. "Because I used to be a teacher. 40 years. I know what it looks like when someone's in a room full of people and still alone with a problem they can't talk about yet." Isaiah looked at her, struck by the precision of that truth. Devin leaned forward slightly, his voice lower. "Whatever it is, you gonna fix it?" Isaiah stared at him, then gave a quiet answer. "I don't know yet." He didn't mean it as an evasion. He meant it because fixing meant confronting. It meant naming, and it meant risking something deeper, the illusion that things were fine, that good intentions were enough, that progress had been made. He had helped build this company. He had shaped its image, but now he was forced to see what he might have missed or avoided in that climb. What happens when you start standing too far above the place you swore you came from. What happens when you forget to look back down? The plane began its initial descent. A chime. Voices waking. Belts clicked. Tray tables snapped into place. The rituals of landing began, neat and rehearsed. Isaiah sat upright, notebook still open. He wrote one last line. This isn't about what they said. It's about what I let grow in silence. As the plane pierced through layers of cloud, Isaiah thought of the boardroom he'd return to in a few days. The questions, the performance metrics, the comfortable deniability. He could hide this, or he could name it. But either way, the mirror had been held up, and it was too clear now to ignore. The hotel lobby was quiet, echoing with the soft roll of suitcase wheels and the buzz of a distant vending machine. Isaiah moved through the space unnoticed, just another late arrival in another business casual outfit. But inside, his mind was anything but calm. He checked in under his alias Eli Moss and took the elevator up to the 8th floor. Room 812. A basic business suite. Functional, generic. The kind of place designed to erase itself the moment you left. He dropped his backpack on the armchair and stood in the middle of the room, unmoving. The silence pressed in. No white noise, no cabin chatter. Just the echo of his thoughts. He opened the curtains and stared out into the city. It looked beautiful from up here, all glowing windows and orderly lanes of traffic. A city asleep under the illusion of harmony. Like Peregrine, like himself, Isaiah took a long shower, hoping it might wash off the residue of the day, the stale air. The overheard words, the image of Amber's neutral face and Marla's shaking hand. It didn't work. In sweatpants and a soft t-shirt, he sat at the desk and opened his laptop. His inbox was full meeting requests, policy drafts, quarterly revenue slides. He ignored them. Instead, he opened a blank document. At the top, he typed Coach Class Audit, Flight 7723, JFK to ATL. He broke it into sections: operational gaps, service inconsistencies, passenger sentiment, crew dynamics, cultural observations. He began filling them in one by one, his notes clipped and efficient. Overhead bin space full before Zone 4 boarding impact on passenger stress. Call light delays. 4 plus min AVG observed. Marla Jensen, loyal flyer, feels invisible. Devin Ruiz, young traveler, deeply cynical about brand sincerity. Back galley overheard conversation includes racial bias and contempt toward leadership. He stopped there, stared at the screen, then opened his phone. He tapped a contact marked simply Nia CCO. Nia Bell, Chief Culture Officer, his closest ally on the executive team. Also, the only one who had known him before the suits, before the office with a view, before the world started introducing him as the first. It rang once, twice. Then you know it's after midnight. Right, came Nia's voice, low and groggy but still sharp. Isaiah exhaled, the first real breath he'd taken in an hour. You awake I am now. Where are you, Atlanta? Hotel near the airport. Just landed a few hours ago. A pause. So? You're mid-mission. Yeah. Nia waited. She always waited. Gave space for the real answer, Isaiah finally said. I heard something tonight. From 2 flight attendants. Didn't know I was listening. Oh boy. Racial undertones. Dismissiveness. Disconnected from everything we claim to stand for. Silence. Isaiah leaned back, rubbed his temple. I'm not even sure they were talking about me, but it doesn't matter. It was cruel, casual, and not even surprising. Which is worse than if it had been, Nia said softly. Exactly. He got up and walked slowly toward the window again. Did you record it? She asked. No, Isaiah replied. I don't want to build a case file. I want to build a case for change. Nia sighed on the other end. That's poetic. Isaiah. But the board likes files. Likes proof. Video. Names. I'm not here to punish 2 flight attendants. Then what are you here to do? Isaiah didn't answer right away. He was still forming the truth. Finally, he said, I'm here to find out how far we've drifted from who we say we are. Nia was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's a dangerous thing to admit out loud. I know. And I think it's time. He sat down again, suddenly tired. I keep thinking about this kid. Devin. Smart. Observant. Completely resigned to being mistreated. They always are, Nia said. Young people spot hypocrisy before they even have the words for it. Isaiah nodded. He asked me if I'm going to fix it. And what'd you say I told him I didn't know? Silence. Do you know now? She asked. He looked at the screen again. The bullet points, the gaps, the people. I'm starting to, he said. Nia's voice softened. You don't have to save the company in 1 week. I'm not trying to save it. I'm trying to see it. That might be harder. I know. Before they hung up, Nia added, when you're ready, I'll help you write the part the board won't want to read. Isaiah smiled. That's why I called you. Get some sleep. Miles. Night. Bell. He closed the laptop. But sleep didn't come for hours. He kept seeing a mirror and his own face in it. The gate agent at ATL's Concourse C smiled without making eye contact. Boarding Group 4. Window seat. Row 17, she said flatly, handing over Isaiah's boarding pass. Thanks, he replied, stepping aside. But her eyes had already shifted to the next passenger in line. The transaction quick, sterile, transactional reminded him again of how much of air travel was now just enough. Just enough courtesy. Just enough efficiency. Just enough to avoid complaints. Rarely more. He tucked the pass into his jacket and moved to the side to observe. The boarding area buzzed with quiet impatience. Parents tried to manage toddlers. A businessman argued with someone on Bluetooth. An elderly couple sat quietly beside each other, their hands barely touching. Isaiah leaned against the wall and watched how the staff moved efficiently. Yes, but distant. Nobody looked passengers in the eye. Nobody smiled, unless forced. He jotted it down in his phone. Ground staff tone. Functional, not welcoming. Sets tone for entire experience. Boarding began. Isaiah filed in with Group 4, resisting the muscle memory that wanted to turn toward the priority lane. The narrow aisle of the Airbus A320 swallowed him into its hum of rolling luggage, mumbled sorries, and the smell of recycled air. As he reached row 17, he noticed the overhead bins already bulging. His seatmate, a middle-aged woman in athletic wear, didn't look up from her tablet as he slid into the window seat. She gave a small sigh, adjusted her yoga mat, and angled away. He didn't blame her. Everyone had learned to withdraw in tight spaces. The flight attendants moved through the cabin. He recognized one of them immediately. Darius, early 30s, well-groomed, crisp uniform, but the eyes were tired. Going through the motions. Another name from a crew performance roster he'd signed off on months ago. Isaiah watched as Darius helped a passenger stow an overhead bag, then turned on his heel mid-sentence when another attendant called his name. The passenger looked momentarily confused, then gave up and sat down. Isaiah jotted another note. Staff interruptions disrupt service. Passenger left mid-assist. No follow-up. The plane pushed back from the gate. Isaiah stared out the window as the engine spooled up. He knew this route, Atlanta to Chicago, better than most. He'd taken it in every phase of his career: recruiter, manager, director, EVP. But this was the first time in years he was seeing it from behind row 10. From here, everything looked smaller, tighter, less forgiving. The cabin vibrated with takeoff. As they leveled off, the drink cart began clattering down the aisle. The usual script followed: something to drink, snack trash. Darius was fast, polite, and just a little too efficient. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His voice never changed register. When Isaiah asked for water, it was handed to him without comment, the cup already dripping on the edges. It was a mirror of the ground staff, functional, not hostile, but hollow. He watched Darius continue down the aisle, efficient and empty. What had he sacrificed to reach this level of detachment? Later, Isaiah walked to the lavatory under the pretense of stretching. In the rear galley, he lingered, waiting not for confrontation, but for truth. Darius appeared minutes later, punching something into the iPad clipped to the wall. Isaiah spoke first. Busy day. Darius looked up, briefly startled, then registered him as a passenger, not a peer, not a boss. 3 legs back to back. Weather delays in Charlotte threw us off. Long day. Isaiah nodded. Tough job. Yeah. Well, Darius gave a tired smile. People think it's just snacks and seatbelts. They don't see the 12-hour days. Crying kids? Angry business class? Isaiah wanted to ask more. Why do you stay? What do you think this job is supposed to be? But he didn't. Instead, he offered what little space he could. You handled the cart well. Darius blinked, surprised. Thanks. Not everyone notices. Isaiah nodded. Some of us do. Back at his seat, Isaiah stared at the seat back in front of him. He was beginning to realize something unsettling. The staff wasn't failing. The system was. They weren't rude. They were overwhelmed, undervalued, trained into numbness. The bar had been lowered until exhaustion became standard. Of course, they were cynical. The real question wasn't why crew morale was low. It was how anyone still cared at all. After landing, Isaiah waited at baggage claim, watching Darius and the rest of the crew disappear behind a side door. No applause, no thanks. Just another day. He pulled out his phone and typed, "We've mistaken survival for professionalism. And the worst part is they're starting to believe it too." Chicago O'Hare felt colder than Isaiah remembered. The terminal buzzed with its usual friction. People rushing, announcements echoing, the smell of over-sanitized air mixing with burnt coffee. Isaiah moved through it quietly, still unnoticed, still Eli Moss, but anonymity, like comfort, was always temporary. He was walking toward the exit when he heard it. Isaiah. He froze, turned slowly. A woman was standing by the Hudson News kiosk, her brows furrowed in disbelief. She was in her early 40s, hair twisted up in a no-nonsense bun, wearing a Peregrine crew jacket with a faded logo. Recognition hit him just as she stepped closer. Angela Monroe, former lead crew trainer. One of the most promising team leads back when Peregrine was still merging with 2 regional carriers. Isaiah remembered signing her promotion papers himself. "I thought that was you," she said, voice low and tight. "Took me a second with the beard and the backpack." Eli Moss. Huh. He winced internally. So much for incognito. "Angela," he said, forcing a warm tone. "It's been a while." She didn't return the smile. 12 years. Isaiah nodded. "You still with Peregrine?" Angela laughed without humor. "Still flying. Still here. Barely." He gestured toward the corner. You have a few minutes. Angela stared at him, then shrugged. Why not? We've got ghosts to unpack. Right? They sat at a small table in the food court, between a Dunkin' and a smoothie bar that nobody seemed to notice. Angela sipped from a bottle of water. Isaiah didn't order anything. He didn't feel hungry anymore. I heard about your promotion. She said, Executive Vice President, right second in command. Something like that. And now you're flying coach under a fake name. What's the play? Undercover boss's redemption arc. Her words were sharp, but not cruel. Just worn down. Isaiah leaned forward. I'm trying to understand what's changed. Angela raised her eyebrows. What's changed? Everything and nothing. The branding got prettier. The uniforms got tighter. The raises disappeared. The support dried up. She paused. And the ones who cared really cared, got tired of yelling into the void. Isaiah felt a wave of discomfort crawl up his spine. He remembered Angela as optimistic, fierce, the kind of crew member who stayed behind to clean the cabin herself if someone else was having a bad day. Now she looked like a cracked window still holding, but rattling in the wind. I didn't know it had gotten this bad, he said honestly. Angela leaned back in her chair. That's the problem. Isaiah, you didn't know. He opened his mouth, closed it. There it was, the truth, raw and waiting. I pushed for service changes, training reforms, culture audits. He said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And how many of those policies were written from the top of a spreadsheet? Silence. You ever fly 5 legs in one day on a skeleton crew? You ever have to calm a woman crying in row 32 while your coworker's throwing up in the galley, and you can't call out sick because you'll lose your line? Isaiah shook his head. No, I haven't. Angela nodded, as if confirming something she already knew. Then her voice softened, just slightly. You were never the worst of them. I remember that. You actually listened. Once. But then you rose fast. Too fast. And we stopped seeing you. I didn't mean to disappear, he said. But you did. She replied. They sat in silence for a minute. People passed them on all sides, rushing to connections, dragging luggage, checking phones. But for Isaiah, the world had shrunk to this table, to this woman who used to believe in the company as much as he did, to the version of himself she used to believe in too. Are you really doing this? Angela asked. Softer now. Not the pitch. The real reason. Isaiah stared down at his hands, then back at her. Because I heard 2 flight attendants talk about someone like me, like I didn't belong, like I hadn't earned it, like I was a PR win, not a real leader. Angela didn't flinch, and that hurt. He nodded. Yeah, now imagine hearing that every week. From passengers, from coworkers, from supervisors, for 20 years. The words landed like a stone in his chest. Angela stood up. Good luck. Isaiah, I hope you actually see something this time. She started to walk away, then paused, turned back. And if you write another policy, she said, make sure someone like me doesn't have to clean blood off a seat with a cocktail napkin again. Isaiah sat there long after she left. He added nothing to his notes. He didn't need to. Back in his Chicago hotel, Isaiah sat in the dark. The curtains were closed. His dinner sat untouched on the table, cooling in its container. He hadn't spoken since Angela walked away. Her words still echoed louder than the passing planes outside. Make sure someone like me doesn't have to clean blood off a seat with a cocktail napkin again. He hadn't even asked for details. He knew there were too many stories like it, and he knew without denial, without ego, that he'd been part of the silence that let them happen. He opened his laptop. The cursor blinked against a white screen labeled Culture and Conditions Internal Report Confidential. Isaiah stared at it. Then, finally, he began to write. This report is not about seat spacing or snacks. It is about people. About a culture that has begun to fail them, not because of malice, but because of neglect. I traveled coach under an alias to understand our service gaps. I discovered something more important. We have institutionalized emotional detachment. From the check-in counter to the rear galley, we have trained our teams to survive instead of serve, to prioritize performance metrics over presence. And in doing so, we have broken something vital. He paused, took a deep breath, wrote again. This is not an attack on our front line. They are not the problem. The problem is leadership, including me. The cursor paused. Isaiah stood up, crossed to the window, and opened the curtains. The city stared back, lights blinking in silent judgment. He remembered his grandfather, a postal worker who wore his pressed uniform like armor, who told Isaiah once, when he was 10, "Boy, if you get the chance to lead, you better make sure it means something for the people who can't say no." Isaiah had nodded back then, full of boyish pride. He wondered what his grandfather would say now. Would he see Isaiah in the window of this hotel room, suit on a hanger, conscience heavy and be proud, or would he just nod solemnly and say, "It's about damn time"? Isaiah sat back down and kept going. The rot isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the way we normalize indifference. In the way a teen like Devin has already learned that being seen is optional. In the way Marla, a loyal customer, accepts being overlooked as the price of economy. In the way Darius performs politeness like a script instead of a conversation. In the way Angela no longer expects anyone at corporate to listen when she speaks. The symptoms are emotional, but the diagnosis is structural. His fingers flew now, not with rage, but with clarity. He wasn't writing a defense. He was writing an elegy and a demand. We cannot train for empathy in a workshop. We must lead it, and we must live it. He hit save, then leaned back, drained, not triumphant, but aligned. He picked up his phone and dialed. Nia answered on the second ring. "Talk to me." "I'm writing it," Isaiah said. "The real one." There was no hesitation. "Send it when you're done. I'll make sure it's read." He hesitated. "Even the parts about me, especially those," Nia said gently. Before hanging up, she added, "You know what my grandmother used to say. What we carry fire in silence until it burns through the skin." Isaiah closed his eyes. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's what this feels like." That night, he didn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because for the first time in months, he finally knew what needed to be done, and he wasn't afraid to do it. The Peregrine Air executive boardroom was a glass-encased penthouse above the clouds. It was meant to feel visionary. Today, it felt sterile. Isaiah stood at the far end of the table, the skyline of downtown Chicago glinting behind him like a silent jury. 12 chairs, 11 executives, one man who had seen the company from the last row of coach. His laptop was connected to the 85-inch screen. His report titled Ground Truth. A cultural and operational assessment waited in full display. The room was unusually quiet. Nia sat to his right, a printed copy of the report in front of her, annotated with sticky notes and red tabs. To his left, Carter Reed, the COO, jaw tight. Across from him, Lindsay Frost, SVP of Customer Experience, arms folded. They had all read it, or enough of it to come in loaded. "Let's begin," Isaiah said quietly. He didn't pace. He didn't dramatize. He just clicked to slide one a blank white page with 5 words in bold black type. We've normalized emotional neglect. A few people shifted in their seats. Isaiah continued, I spent 4 flights traveling coach, under an alias, not to play a stunt, but to observe. What I found wasn't a customer service issue. It was a human disconnection issue. He clicked again. Images flicked by snapshots of the crew, passengers, gate agents, moments, faces, not charts, not numbers, people. Passengers weren't angry, Isaiah said. They were resigned. He paused. Worse than that. They were invisible. Lindsay broke the silence first. We've been aware of service inconsistencies, she said. That's not new. Isaiah nodded. Yes, but we've responded with checklists, more training modules, speed goals, all designed to optimize the system. He looked up. But the system doesn't want to connect. It wants to move productively. And people are not product. Carter leaned forward. So what's your point? That flight attendants need to smile more? Nia raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Isaiah kept his voice calm. My point is that smiling isn't the problem. Burnout is, cynicism is. We've built a culture that depletes empathy and punishes anyone who tries to restore it. He clicked to a slide titled Invisible Costs of Cultural Erosion and read aloud. Missed connections are not just about flights. They are between crew and customer, leader and team, vision and practice, a beat. Then he added, I heard 2 flight attendants refer to someone they thought was a black executive as a diversity hire. That changed the air. No one moved. Lindsay uncrossed her arms slowly. Carter sat back. Isaiah didn't rush. They weren't talking about me, but they were talking about what I represent. He gestured to the screen. What we claim to represent. Do we know who they were? Carter asked carefully. I do, Isaiah said. But this isn't about individuals. It's about what was safe to say. Out loud. In uniform. Nia spoke for the first time. It's cultural rot. Not at the surface. Not on paper. But in the air. Isaiah turned to his final slide. Recommendations, immediate and structural. Reinstate human-centered service rituals X cookies. Handwritten thank yous and first child comfort kits. Redesign training to prioritize emotional intelligence over efficiency alone. Rotate executives through anonymous economy experiences. Quarterly. Establish crew feedback loops that bypass management filters. Launch a culture equity audit with external partners. Public commitment to internal dignity. Not just external optics. He closed his laptop. I'm not asking for applause. He said, I'm asking for acknowledgement. That we are losing something vital. And if we don't address it now, we may not get another chance. The room was silent. Then Carter spoke. And what about shareholders' optics? The next earnings call, Isaiah didn't flinch. Our brand isn't suffering because we're too honest. It's suffering because too many people don't believe us anymore. Then, to everyone's surprise, Lindsay Frost leaned forward. I had a woman email last week to say her mother used to fly Peregrine, just for the way the crew treated her, knew her name. Brought her tea the way she liked it. She glanced around the table. She said now it feels like a transaction. Cold. Forgettable. A pause. I didn't respond to that email. Lindsay admitted. I didn't know what to say. Isaiah nodded gently. That email was your culture audit. Elaine Winters, the chairwoman, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. I want Isaiah and Nia to form a task force. Internal and external voices. Bring back your recommendations in 30 days with budget plans attached. Her voice was calm, deliberate. And let me be clear, I don't care if it ruffles feathers. I care if it changes us. No one objected, because no one could. As the meeting adjourned, Isaiah gathered his notes, calm on the outside, but storming within. He had told the truth. Now came the hard part, living it. This part closes the loop. Isaiah boards another flight, not hidden, not distant, but fully present. It's not perfection, but something real has changed. And for the first time in years, he sits in coach, not because he has to, but because he chooses to lead from where it matters. It had been 3 months since the board meeting, 3 months of deep dives, raw interviews, and unfiltered stories that no dashboard could quantify. Peregrine's new cultural task force had already rolled out pilot programs in 6 cities, a new mentorship initiative for junior crew, executive ride-alongs with gate agents, and small, powerful changes snack carts with warmth. Call buttons answered with intent, even handwritten cards in first class, just like the old days. But for Isaiah, the real test wasn't in metrics. It was in seat 26C. Welcome aboard. The flight attendant greeted with a smile. Not the performative kind, but the real thing. Isaiah nodded. Thank you. He had booked this ticket under his real name. No alias. No disguise. He wanted the crew to know who was watching and who was listening. He slid into his window seat. It was the same route as before JFK to San Francisco, the same aircraft model, the same aisle width, the same stiff cushions. And yet, it felt different. His seatmates this time were a curly-haired 6th grader named Luca, playing with a Rubik's Cube, and a nurse named Deja, headed to visit her sister after a long hospital stretch. Luca greeted Isaiah with a wave. Hi, you fly a lot. A bit. Isaiah smiled. My dad says business travelers always wear nice shoes. You've got sneakers on, so maybe you're a secret spy instead. Isaiah chuckled. Something like that. Before takeoff, a young flight attendant with a calm, grounded presence passed through their row. It was Kevin. Isaiah remembered him. 6 months ago, Kevin had been the most disengaged crew member on that first flight. Now his eyes were clearer. He looked anchored. Good afternoon, Kevin said. Just a reminder, we got SkyPal kits for any young flyers if you're interested. Luca looked up. Do they have puzzles? Kevin smiled. They do now. He handed the kit over, along with a pin shaped like a peregrine feather. Captain says you're honorary crew today. Luca beamed. Deja leaned over to Isaiah. That's new. Last time I flew, nobody looked at us twice. Isaiah smiled, deeply. Yeah, I've noticed that too. Mid-flight, Isaiah walked the length of the aircraft, not to monitor, not to judge, but just to see. He passed Brenda, now a lead trainer, calmly showing a new hire how to manage beverage carts during turbulence. He watched an agent helping a blind passenger to the lavatory with quiet patience. He noticed a hand-scribbled card taped near the galley. Every seat has a story. Let's honor all 180. He exhaled. Back in 26C, Deja was scrolling through her phone, and Luca had fallen asleep on her shoulder, puzzle kit still open in his lap. The plane shook slightly from turbulence. Instinctively, Isaiah reached over and pulled Luca's SkyPal blanket over the boy's arms. Deja noticed. She smiled. You're good with people. Isaiah didn't reply right away. Then I wasn't always. I used to be good with numbers, and plans, and distance. Deja tilted her head. What changed? Isaiah looked out the window, then back at her. I stopped pretending leadership meant standing above people. It means sitting beside them. even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then, as the plane began to descend into San Francisco, a flight attendant made an announcement, something Isaiah had helped rework months earlier. "We know you had options. Thank you for choosing Peregrine. Whether you're flying in 2A or 36F, we're honored to carry your story." A few heads turned, some smiled. Small things matter. At the gate, Isaiah let the cabin empty before standing. Kevin stood by the front, greeting passengers as they left. When Isaiah approached, Kevin didn't miss a beat. "Mr. Miles," he said respectfully, "I didn't want to make a big deal in front of everyone, but I appreciate what you did." Isaiah extended a hand. "You're doing it too." They shook. Kevin added, "I'm still learning, but I actually look forward to flights now." "That's new." Isaiah nodded. "It's supposed to be." On the jet bridge, Isaiah's phone buzzed. A message from Nia. "Board loved your last update. Culture audit showing highest morale in 5 years. Still miles to go, but now they believe it's possible." He replied one story at a time. As he stepped into the terminal, Isaiah passed a display screen showing Peregrine's new campaign. It didn't show champagne in first class. It didn't show upgraded app interfaces. It showed a child holding a steward's hand in Turbulence, a nurse laughing in row 24, an elderly couple sipping tea, heads tilted together, and the tagline, "Every journey matters." Isaiah paused to watch and smiled. We often measure progress by headlines and numbers, but change the real kind starts quietly. It starts with a boy and coach wondering if adults see him, a grandmother longing for the warmth of a chocolate chip cookie, a flight attendant burned out by the weight of silence, and a black executive finally hearing the things that were never meant for him to hear. This story isn't just Isaiah's. It belongs to every person who's ever been overlooked, every employee who's ever been told to just do their job, every customer made to feel like they didn't matter. And yes, it's a call-out to the culture that masks discrimination with professionalism, to the systems that confuse cost-cutting with leadership, to all of us who stay silent when someone else is made small. But it's also a call into empathy, to courage, to choosing people over processes. So the next time you board a flight or walk into any room, ask yourself who's in seat 26C today, and are we treating them like they matter? If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more human-centered stories. Let's build a world where everyone is seen, and no seat, no matter how far back, is forgotten. See you in the next story.